Alright, some of you who's been following my stuff for a little bit may wonder a little why I kind of rag on centrism. Key reason is and this is kind of more liberals, like liberals tend to be pretty centrists. A lot of times they're kind of center right, if not farther right. Because the real issue for me is like we should have a bigger Overton window where there's a lot more going on the left instead of the entire thing basically comprising of center right to far right. We don't really have leftist representation, generally speaking, not in our leadership, in electeds, not really, and definitely not in media, aside from maybe Hassan Piker and some people that there's other like independent media people and people that I kind of follow, but like most of them are in a broader spectrum where there was like more leftist occupying that space. They would be kind of in the center. Hassan is a socialist, so he'd be there. That's sort of the center part of like the left wing, and like Bernie Sanders and AOC, they're right in the middle. But in our politics, most of our leaders are in the center right, and that's like people in the Democratic Party, and then everybody else is like far right. The Republicans are a fascist party at this point. Like this is what they're supporting. So my problem with liberals, like quote unquote like centrists, they're not actual centrists, they're like center right, center of the right, from a more global perspective. An American perspective, like they're center right, like they're pretty bad on their politics as it is. Like they're for like austerity, they're for process, they're for decorum. They're fine with a lot of things that I think are actually really harmful for society, for our social order. And the biggest problem that I have with centrists in this country, liberals, is they give credence and validation to right-wing ideas. Because the argument is always like, let's be pragmatists and let's try to find a middle ground. But the problem is, they're not paying attention to the game that's being played on the right, because the right wing will go, it's kind of like negotiation. Like if you're bidding on a car that, the average sales in some consumer index is like, it's marked at like 20K, and then like, because of options and like dealer tricks, they're going to try to get you like 25, and you want to come in, the market value is like maybe 17, but they want to make their money, so you may be willing to move to 22K, even though that's like 5K above what you should be paying. And that's kind of like, for the lack of better analogy, right? That's kind of what the liberals do, centrists do, because the right wing is going to be the one that hits you at that further point where you don't really even want to be, and they move you. And that's my problem with centrism. That's my problem with pragmatism. And my argument is, I think we need to be boldly, unapologetically leftist. Like, we should be moving towards like getting even like ideas that line up with communism more socially acceptable. So that way, if we get pulled at all on where we want to be, it's more like something that aligns with socialism or social democratic principles, because we need to move the spectrum back to the left, because in my view, that's where the solutions are, and that's where we see them. Sometimes we've tried stuff in the United States, like small experiments, like housing first policies with no strings attached, with needed services for people. And we've done experiments like that in this country. And where they do those elsewhere, they're very successful, they save money, and they help more people. And that's what we should want. Like, if you want to talk about being more efficient, you need to talk about being more effective. Because, like, I would argue that right-wing policies, and again, there's some underhanded stuff that happens with right-wing policies, like they are designed to fail on purpose so they can prove the point that, see, government doesn't work, we have to privatize it. And then initially, they give you this whole song and dance like, oh, it's going to be better, it's going to be more efficient, and you're going to get more features and bells and whistles, yada, 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 yada. And then they actually do it, and it costs more money, and it gets worse and worse over time. And then you forgot what the public service looked like in the first place. And then they have their whole marketing campaign to sell a shit sandwich to you and think that you're eating like your favorite, your favorite sandwich ingredients, like it's prime, tri-tip or something. Like, they're trying to sell you tri-tip, but what you're actually eating is a shit sandwich. So that's my contention with centrism, with liberalism, and neoliberalism is even worse. Like, neoliberalism basically is this idea that, well, we're not really getting a lot done with just using like public only programs that are, analyzed by the government and customized by the government, and we establish, agencies to handle these things, and we, spend public money on public goods and services and make it so there's accountability, and we make sure we know where our dollars are being spent, and we're making sure that there's things in place to monitor it properly and make sure that it's serving the purpose, and there's all this stuff that like regulations can do and government can do and should do. But instead of doing that, they're surrendering the idea that, oh, well, government doesn't work, so we're gonna do public-private partnership, which just makes rich people a lot of money, uses our tax dollars inefficiently, and then we kind of pay twice for it. Like, right-wingers complain about taxes, but we should be complaining about the fact that, like, there's been a lot of public resources funneled into private corporations, so very wealthy oligarchs, robber barons, can take a cut. So effectively, we're double paying for something that eventually ends up getting made worse, and they're just taking more and more money out of it. And then they'll gobble up other competition and make the whole sector terrible, and they'll become like basically a monopoly. And if they get so big, they can waste our tax dollars because it becomes too challenging and too costly to actually hold them accountable. And then we get hit on that side of it too. So that's sort of the argument for like why we have like antitrust laws and things like that. Why we have the legal system. And like, I think one of the other arguments that people on the left have is one of the reasons why we want to have higher taxes for wealthy people and corporations is to prevent them from getting so big and so out of hand, especially if they're kind of touching things that are essential for people, because then they have more control and power over us, and it becomes harder to check them. And that becomes a direct interest for the public, and it becomes a public threat. So it's fair to say that robber barons and corporations are, for all intents and purposes, they can be a natural enemy to the people, specifically workers, but also to consumers. Like, there's a reason why we have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because we know that businesses don't always operate honestly. Like, they'll operate honestly when there's checks on them and there's cops on the beat, but they still try to get away with stuff. And that's why we need those enforcement agencies in order to, like, If somebody gets ripped off, we can report it. Like, we can ask them directly, and then if the corporation that ripped you off, if we can't get our money back, then we have the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to contact them so they can fight for us. And like programs like that, for the amount of money that we put in, it's like maybe $700 million annually. I think we get something like $2.71 billion back. Like, that's a pretty good return on investment. But then again, people like Elon Musk decided they wanted to try to kill that, and there's still a fight going on about that. But like, I think people should pay attention to any government service or agency that rich people have a tendency to attack, because odds are those are things that are actually really good for the people. And you can listen to their arguments, but be very critical when you think about those things, and make sure that you're looking for the information about those agencies or services or government programs from people that are actually like subject matter experts. Like, the problem that we have is our media is owned by very wealthy, like right-wing billionaires. So what we get is we get the 24-hour news cycle, so that impacts what stories get told. So it used to be the media and actual journalists would be careful about which stories are selected and like what they consider important, but everything's been so commercialized, and just the 24-hour news cycle just reduces, I guess, like the value of what's being told. And like, that's why everything is just, even important things, we learn about it and then it gets buried because there's so many other things. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are struggling right now keeping up with what's going on with this the Republican regime, headed up by the symptom but not the underlying major problem we have to address, Donald Trump. They just keep hitting you with all this stuff, and people can't keep up. That's like the Steve Bannon strategy of flood the zone with shit. People can't pay attention, and then we're missing the real power grabs that are going on. It's just like the information, the media environment is really not great, especially in a country where we've been intentionally misinformed for decades, and we've had a lot of right-wing propaganda. And then the center right, it's called liberal media, they're like, the problem is like the critiques that they have, they don't go far enough. Like, they're not strong enough. Like, for me, there's a problem in our society when the majority of people don't realize that the Republican Party is full of liars, fiends. They're weirdo Christians. They are fascists. They are Christian nationalists. They hate regular people, and they want them to suffer. And they just want power to do really terrible things to our society, because they want to be authoritarians. Well, they are authoritarians, and they worship authoritarians here and around the world. It's about power and control, and they rely on people being not informed enough and misunderstanding the world in such a fundamental way that people don't see them as the villain, the principal villain, and the people that they prop up and support only, which is the robber barons. If people don't see the Republican Party, in short, if people don't see the Republican Party as just a wholly evil group of people that are absolutely awful for all of us and global stability and global peace, like, they're literally like destroying our environment, and they're laughing about it. they'll send innocent people. They just did. They sent a bunch of innocent people to a literal gulag in El Salvador. It's like 75 to 90% of those people had no criminal records whatsoever anywhere. And the ones that smaller percentage of people that did have a criminal record, the majority of them were nonviolent. So like all this noise, all these claims that they're rounding up, like it's intentional. They're trying to like claim that they're targeting people that nobody would care about. And again, I would argue we should also care about those people. They should still get due process. They're still entitled to their constitutional rights. Anybody telling you that like somebody doesn't deserve to have their constitutional rights honored is a bad person. They're an immoral person. They are like complying in advance with illegal and immoral things. Like even somebody who committed a heinous crime, they're accused of committing a heinous crime. Accusations happen. False arrests happen. Like something like 2%, 2 or 4% of people that get the death penalty, like it's executed, were innocent. We find out years later, like we know that we have bad cops. We know that there's pressure on police to get a bad guy. And sometimes he'll do or she'll do is kind of what happens. And I'm not trying to like, I know I talk about cops sometimes in ways that a lot of people will get pissed off about, but like, I want to believe that good cops probably mostly agree with me that we have a problem. We have many problems with our criminal justice system. My main point is we have a fundamental problem when essentially we have a system that doesn't do people's constitutional rights a real service. Like they're being violated because we're supposed to have protections from cruel and unusual punishment. What's the stupid, common, like sort of joke that people have about people that go to jail? Like they joke about rape. They joke about people getting, killed in jail, shivved, right? They're still exposed to pretty horrible stuff. Sometimes it's like they get mistreated by the guards, all that stuff. Like, I don't see the value in a system that clearly hasn't served us, and I would say it's kind of unconstitutional. And I think it hasn't been critically analyzed by a lot of people, and we sort of swept it under the rug because we don't care enough about human rights, and we just kind of go, well, they did a bad thing, so they deserve to be locked up. There are other ways to handle this stuff. Like there is restorative justice that works better. It's been done in other countries. We may have tried it here. I can't remember if we had some test cases, but like places that it's been tried, like restorative justice, getting people, mental health treatment for things like drug dependency, mental health challenges, disabilities that they're not getting proper services for, people that are just resource poor, like they live in areas that are resource poor, or they got a bad luck of the draw, like they weren't born into the lucky sperm club, so they don't get that opportunity. And I don't like that. I don't like the environment that the police have to deal with all the time either, because like if a lot of your interactions with human beings are genuinely kind of terrifying, and you're constantly just being exposed to people that are like having their worst day, you feel like your life is at risk. I can imagine what that does to your view of humanity, and you probably have no patience or don't feel a connection to people that have some critiques of that public service that's being offered. And I wish people would have an honest conversation about it. because like I do feel for people that are trying to do a good thing. They think they're doing a good thing, but it's warping who they are as people. And sadly, the way that we do training in the United States for our police, like I believe there's overlap with training that happens in Israel. They're just they're learning to dehumanize people, and I think there's some dehumanizing that's happening within them too. And I don't like that either. Like, I don't like that for cops. Like, I don't like the fact that like what that kind of job turns them into. But if we have systems in place that don't serve us, I think we should re-examine them. Because like, I don't think that's a good use of our resources. It's not a good use to have police do 50 million different things that don't really match up with their training. Or even if you do train them, like if they're under-resourced, they're not going to be able to do a good job doing that. It's just not really tenable. And when you have people just like prison is almost like a college for people that commit crimes. Like that's what it looks like statistically. When you have people that go into the prison system and then they end up going back, what does that say about that? I think it says bad things about prison and whether we're actually like preparing people to come back and be reintegrated in society. I think it says terrible things about how we treat people that have committed crimes but done the time. You know, they serve their sentences. It tells me that we don't have enough resources into reintegrating them into society. And that, for me, I think that's like the restorative justice part. Like, maybe we can add that in. But anyway, I totally forgot where I was when I started on this thought train. That's a thing that happens to me. So I'll touch back. Maybe I'll add a video. This is already like 25 minutes. Yeah, it started out about the whole centrism thing. Yeah, I don't think it's useful to validate right-wing ideas. I don't think it's a good idea to give them credibility. I think you need a counter-argument saying, listen, I disagree with you because I think where you're going is problematic, and I think it's already been tried about a bazillion times, and I think we've seen that it doesn't work, and people are upset. They want solutions. Here's something else that's already worked over here, and it'll probably save us money, and it serves more people, and it does more good. That's what you got to do. All right, take care. I love you. Bye.